Hi, this is Richard Edelman, and you are listening to The Trust Makers.
So, hello everyone. I'm Jackie Cooper. I'm the Global Chief Brand Officer and a Senior Advisor for Edelman. And today on The Trust Makers, we're exploring how trust in health is evolving and what it means for the brands that help us take care of ourselves daily. The findings from the 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer Special Report, Trust in Health, show that people are redefining who they trust with their health and how they expect companies to show up in the moments that matter most. They're adapting to new innovations in the space, whether it's AI, wearable tech, or having that on-demand physician, and they're finding unique ways to take their health into their own hands. With all of this change, that makes trust more important than ever. Today, I'm really delighted to be joined by Katie Williams, who's the US Chief Marketing Officer for Haleon, one of the world's largest consumer health companies. Katie leads the marketing behind some of the most trusted brands in the category, including Sensodyne, Advil, and Tums, and has been at the forefront of how Haleon connects with the next generation of consumers. So, Katie, welcome to the Trust Makers.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm so excited to be here, and I couldn't be more excited to talk about this topic.
That's great. That's great. I think it's such an interesting time for this topic because we've probably had more change in recent years than sort of the decades beforehand. And so we see that the past few years have really reshaped the way people think about and engage with healthcare. And it's really about being much more personal, it seems. It's clearly much more digital, and therefore probably very much more confusing. This obviously must be a bit of a mixed blessing. So can you just share with us what you think this means in terms of the opportunities, but also the responsibilities that this creates for a consumer health company like Haleon?
The reality is people's relationship with their own health changed significantly, starting 5 years ago with the pandemic and then continuing through that time. I think at that point, people really recognized a different level of vulnerability that they had with their health, regardless of what age they were at. I think in the past, people would meet certain life stages and have, different relationships, and their relationship with their own health and personal health care would evolve. But, after the pandemic, I think everyone understood that their health is critical. The health of the people around them can impact them as well, and really started to take a much more personal and proactive approach to their health. The one thing that we do know is that health is incredibly personal. You have to ensure that you're treating people with humanity when you think about supporting them on their healthcare journey. And trust is critical in establishing a relationship when it comes to people thinking about their needs from a healthcare perspective.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that pandemic is over but not over, because the repercussions and the behaviour change and the knowledge that we have is kind of going to keep going forever, it seems. It really is a seismic shift from how we treat health and what we ask about.
Yeah, and I think, so many things changed in that time. I think everyone got a crash course in their own health, but also everyone started behaving differently in terms of where they got information from. In the case of 5 years ago, it was based on necessity. People couldn't go to their healthcare providers' offices. So they had to start looking at ways to connect with, healthcare experts in the digital space. They didn't have all the information maybe that they needed at the time, or information was changing rapidly. And so they had to get comfortable with really evaluating multiple sources of information and understanding and discerning maybe fact from fiction. Not only has people's relationship with healthcare changed, but their behaviors around how they seek health information, who they trust in that information, and how they go about making their choices from a healthcare perspective has changed significantly.
Yeah, I mean, on our data, on our report on trust and health, we found that while 72% of people say formal academic training makes someone, quote unquote, a legitimate health expert, 67% say personal experience matters just as much. And that's such an interesting percentage, because what does that do in an area of science, right? A brand built on science, a brand built on fact. How do you kind of address that if that's what people are kind of defaulting to now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that. And I think it's so powerful. One, it says, hey, that, traditional experts or expertise is still very valued, which is good, especially for a company like Haleon and companies like ours. It's important to have expert voices and that people still trust those experts. But what they're also saying is, I don't want to just know what you know. I want to know that you understand me. I want to know that you understand the experience that I'm having. Understanding me and that personal intimacy as it relates to healthcare is critical in me having satisfactory results, right? And so one way to understand is to really have shared experiences. And so that's why you see, for example, expertise in the traditional way, like medical providers, but you also are definitely seeing the emergence of expertise in the non-traditional way, like family, friends, creators, influencers. Many of those people talk about their own personal experiences, not just the knowledge that they might have on the science, for example. And that I think connects people. It helps them feel safe. It helps them feel seen. It helps them relate to the content maybe in a different way than if it was just coming in a more traditional sense.
I think we definitely want to share information if we want to help people or we have a health issue and you want to know about other people who've had that health issue. But what happens if it kind of goes slightly wrong and we get into the area of misinformation? There's been quite a lot of feedback, for example, on TikTok where people are posting things and it's not real or it's not factually correct, but the sharing of it makes it seem powerful and makes it seem right. How do you kind of address that role with Haleon and in sort of trying to help that misinformation be limited?
Well, the one thing that I think is important for us is to recognize that consumer behaviors have changed and where they want to seek information is evolving, particularly with younger consumers, where they're much more comfortable starting their search on healthcare needs or any need for that matter on a social platform or in an AI enabled platform. And so we have to recognize that that behavior has changed. The last thing we should do is not meet them where they are. And I think our goal as a consumer health provider with really trusted brands is to ensure that our voices can be heard in that space. So even if there is misinformation, we can be a space where factual information, science-backed information can be provided, but we've, evolved how we show up. We engage with creators and influencers, whether they're experts or lifestyle creators, so that the facts can be, placed in the areas and with the voices that matter to consumers. But we're providing the information that we know has a tremendous amount of research and understanding behind it. Although, we can't prevent misinformation from being out there. What we can do is make sure that we're in those spaces so that chances are when people are seeking out information, let's say on heartburn, they find Tums and they find it in a fun and engaging way and related to their lifestyle and their needs. But the facts and the science are still absolutely accurate and valid.
That takes us on to a subject close to both our hearts today, which is how we're working with Gen Z from our particular perspectives. The Wall Street Journal published a piece today that we're both in, which is lovely to have connected on that first. You gave a great quote to that journalist where you said, Gen Z doesn't just want to know that the science is working, they want to feel that it's working. Do you just want to talk a little bit more about what you meant by that?
Yeah, what I think is really cool about Gen Z and their behaviors when it comes to their own personal health care. One, they're very knowledgeable, and they have a broad range of understanding of what healthcare should look like, whether it's physical and spanning, mental health as well. And they also are proactive about their own health. And that I think that proactivity leads to engaging in products that may not necessarily just be about answering, a symptom. Sometimes it might be being proactive about, I know I'm going out with my friends. I know sometimes I don't have, the best relationship with the chicken wings that we're about to eat. So I'm going to bring Tums with me to make sure that I can still have fun, but take care of the heartburn that might show up while I'm enjoying myself. And so I think they're incredibly proactive. They're comfortable with the fact that maybe everything doesn't work out the way that they plan. They're ready to prepare for that. But they also think about, hey, I want my hair to be as luscious and beautiful and healthy as it is now, or I want to maintain the energy that I have as a, 25 or 30-year-old. And so these multivitamins are maybe something that can help me kind of maintain that energy. But they want to know that it's working, not just in their head. How things smell can give them a cue. They want gummies for their multivitamins and not just a pill to swallow because they want to enjoy it while they're doing it, but they also want to know that it works. And so, they're seeking out confirmation that the science works, but they're also seeking out multisensorial experience to really help them sort of not only enjoy their health and well-being, but recognize that it's doing something for them, whether it's giving them energy or has a great taste that they can enjoy and make sure that it helps them take it every day. In the case of Sensodyne whitening, we've got this great science-backed demonstration that, Sensodyne Clinical White has a claim that says it can help your teeth get 2 shades whiter after 2 weeks of usage. How do you, explain that? How do you show that? So we took a normal like brown egg and said, hey, what if we, brush the brown egg for 2 weeks with the brown egg lighten in its shade? And sure enough, it does. And that kind of just relatable way to show the science is something that Gen Z consumers really respond to.
And I love that. But what I also love about the way you talk is something that's really been substantiated from the Gen Z Lab, which I founded with the team here like 3 years ago as an authority on marketing to Gen Z. And the key thing that's been a constant is just talk with us, just know us. We do see that this is a generation that's really happy to feedback, who wants to be involved in giving feedback to companies and having much more transparency and intimacy with their brand. So the consumer brand relationship has to be a lot tighter with Gen Z, and they have no problem in being asked. And in fact, they're kind of upset if you don't ask them. Now, the way you're talking, you clearly have such a brilliant handle on what makes them tick and what they want, and that kind of multi-sensory, multi-experience that Gen Z are looking for. It's also a way of them getting into community connections. So how do you kind of make sure that you know what's going on with this generation? Because clearly you have really got your arms wrapped around them.
The reality is nowadays there's so many different ways that you can connect with consumers and understand, what they're thinking, feeling, and doing. And we try to evolve our insights approach accordingly. So we use everything from traditional methods where you might be evaluating social conversations or looking at social commerce to understand ratings and what's driving positivity in certain places, what constitutes superiority when it comes to product experiences. We're leveraging AI tools to give us early stage insights using agentic AI to better understand consumers. There's so much information that can be leveraged through that to get you started and help you learn maybe in ways quicker and faster and with more data than we've ever been able to do before. We're using agentic AI, for example, where we develop personas to better understand consumers who are on a GLP-1 journey. So many consumers that are starting to think about leveraging GLP-1s to help them with weight management realize typically in the first 6 months that they deal with, side effects that maybe they weren't expecting. A lot of those have to do with gastrointestinal side effects, like sometimes heartburn or gas. It might be things like nutrition reduction because of the low caloric intake. And so multivitamins might be something that could be helpful for them. They need to add fiber to their diet, for example. We have so many products in our portfolio that can address those needs when people are on that journey. But we really didn't understand yet, like what that journey was for consumers. What was it like to start taking a GLP-1? Who were people that were maybe more likely to want to engage and understand what a GLP-1 journey might look like? what were the side effects? When did they start? And then if someone stopped taking a GLP-1, what were some of those reasons? And could we support them on that journey by better making them aware of our products that could be complementary to that journey, because we can satisfy things with Gas-X, for example, and gas, or heartburn with Tums, or Benefiber with, the higher fiber intake needed. But it's so hard to get that information because, one, it's personal information and we have to make sure we respect that. But also it's a fast growing and evolving space. So things like agentic AI helped us learn, for example, that people tend to change not only their lifestyle habits when it comes to eating when they're on GLP-1, but they change their fitness habits. They tend to sign up for more social activities, for example. And so it was a way for us to learn about consumers using new technology in ways that we wouldn't have been able before, and then connect our brands in spaces that maybe we wouldn't have thought of if we hadn't sort of been open to that type of exploration.
What's clear from what you've shared there is the speed and agility now that's necessary, because if we think culturally, news-wise, medically-wise, we didn't even have that GLP-1 conversation a couple of years ago. And now it's absolutely everywhere. It's in common culture. It's in common conversation. There's a massive amount of consumers who are searching for information, looking for support. And years ago, this would be a much slower burn. This has been so extremely rapid. How do you kind of account and deal and have that agility at Haleon? Because obviously for the messages, the responses, the knowledge, have you had to sort of change the way you market because of the speed of culture and the speed of science kind of colliding at this point?
I don't know that we've had to change the way we market, other than looking at our full portfolio as a solution versus maybe just looking at a single brand. We're more engaging on, a lifestyle, as a lifestyle partner, and as a support partner across our portfolio of brands, versus just looking at single messaging associated with one brand and one consumer experience, for example. But I would say what's really changed rapidly is how we're getting the insights and the need to embrace different ways to connect. So to your point, maybe 5 years ago, as this trend was growing and accelerating so quickly, we might have spent a few months doing focus groups, doing those traditional approaches to consumer insights, maybe do some in-homes and that kind of thing, which some of those things can absolutely be very valid depending upon the situation. But now we have the opportunity to really get a sense for how people's lives are changing through the use of technology, through the use of AI, through the use of social listening, through the use of, shopper engagement with retailer platforms, for example. And so you have so many sources of information that you can draw from. It allows you to be agile. It allows you to be quicker. And I think our approach at Haleon is to really, again, with our mission of delivering a better everyday health with humanity, it's really how can we bring the humanity into the technology? How can we pull the human insights from that technology? And so I think that's what really sets us apart.
It's a really good segue to talk a little bit about AI from the point of view as some resistance to this technology. Our report found that 43% of people reject AI in patient interactions. You've been talking very compellingly about how you're using it in research, development. What do you think is the biggest opportunity for AI then to sort of improve people's everyday health? And where do you think we need to draw boundaries?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great question. And I think it's a question that we continue to evaluate as we're starting to explore this space. There's a couple of ways I think about it. One is consumers are already leveraging it quite a bit. To find information, to help them understand new issues or spaces, to help them plan their vacations, whatever it might be. The behaviors are starting to evolve pretty quickly. And so I think recognizing and understanding when it comes to connecting with consumers, you are going to have to really understand how you can connect through those platforms in a way that's relevant and helpful to them. I think second for us is we're trying to understand and learn about AI capabilities as it relates to our business. I think it really is a recognition that it's as much of a people and organizational transformation as it is a technology transformation, right? I recently sat with a partner externally where they talked about the importance of really thinking culturally about the changes that need to be required, because it's not just about adding a technology layer and letting technology take over some of the tasks that previously were done, but it's really upskilling an organization to now use a new technology as a partner to drive its growth, to drive its insights, to drive some decision making. So it's an incredibly useful tool to help us do things at scale that maybe took us a lot more time and a lot more money in the past, but it requires a tremendous amount of upskilling from employees and leaders to really understand how to best leverage it in a way that's helpful for the business, protects our consumers, and unlocks the value associated with it. So we talk about at Haleon our culture of empathy in the marketing organization, which is about the intersection between humility and curiosity. When you're empathetic, when you have an empathetic culture, you're humble. You recognize, hey, maybe I don't know everything about this person, about this technology, about this macro trend, but you're curious enough to go find out. And I think what AI enables us to do is really supercharge that empathy by providing us with information that can really inform that curiosity.
It's lovely to hear you talk about AI balanced with empathy and curiosity and humility, because I firmly believe that balance of the technology, but also the human part, we have to keep two together. And that's how obviously it's going to be a more positive experience for companies and for people. And obviously AI is a huge part of where we're going and the journey ahead of all of us. Some of it we know, some of it we don't know. With Haleon, what makes you feel the most excited when you sort of look ahead and you think about the consumer health industry over the next few years?
The one thing I have learned in my 5 years now in consumer health, every single day, there's a new headline, there's a new consumer opportunity. All of these things show up. But what I will say is what I'm excited about and some of the trends that we already see. GLP-1s are absolutely going to change the face of healthcare as we know it, about people's health outcomes, about people's relationship with their own health. The other is we have, these demographic shifts that are continuing to shape healthcare significantly. There's more older, people over 65 coming of age in the next 5 years than we've seen in a very long time. And with that comes, different healthcare needs. And we have the opportunity to serve that population of consumers with things like Medicare Advantage OTC benefits that consumers don't even know they have the ability to access. Almost 30 million users of Medicare Advantage programs of older adults in the U.S. have access to free dollars that they can use towards OTC products, but only 30% of them actually use it, especially with the population of consumers that may be on a tighter income, maybe on a fixed income, don't want to be a burden to their families, want to still have freedom and independence and things like that. To know that there's unused benefits like that can support them in their everyday health needs is a huge opportunity. One, to ensure better everyday health for those consumers, but two, for us to partner with them and give them visibility to those benefits and the products that we might have that could support them in that.
It's interesting what you say about the longevity conversation, because we launched the Gen Z Lab and then a year ago, we launched the Longevity Lab. And the thing that prompted that was the insight that the age bracket of 55 to 72 is responsible for more than half of all global spending across goods and services. And yet marketers only attribute 5 to 10% of their marketing budgets to that bracket. And of course, in marketing, the sort of default is to go to the generation that's coming up. And that's not great on two fronts. One, because Gen Z are so fickle and is going to change their mind 1,000 times and research 1,000 things and have this forensic ability to check things out. So they're not just going to sort of plod along and without asking questions. And then two, because 55 to 72, and we stopped it at 72 because after 72, some of those health issues that you referenced become a little bit more acute, are feeling they're not being seen and they're not being targeted, but also they're the ones that want to take the things that make their life better and give them the optimum experience. Because again, on our data, at that age, you're about 14 years younger physically on average than your parents would have been at that age. So we're kind of looking at different behavior. Don't just put us in white linen on the side of a cruise ship wearing spectacles. It might be that we want to buy the clothing, we want to be well, we want to have the supplements, we want to make sure that we're optimum about all of that. And I sort of brought that up because you mentioned about that longevity conversation. I think health is an increasing focus for that generation who want the control as much as Gen Z want the control, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. We started, and I'm not sure who started this, so I'm definitely not going to take credit for it or give Haleon credit for it, but we definitely live by it here, is the idea of the evolution of lifespan to health span. It's one thing to live long, but it's another thing to be healthy while you're living. And to your point, if now, as consumers, if people age, they are living longer and feeling younger and actually physically younger than maybe, their parents were. I think that kind of speaks to that idea. It's really important for us. Sometimes we talk about health on the 9. So when people think about health, they think about it at 29, 39, 49. 59. And depending upon where you are on that spectrum, you have different health needs and you have different health desires. And it's really important for us, as we started this conversation, to recognize that healthcare is so personal. And in order to gain that trust, you really have to understand what the personal experiences are at those different stages in your life. So yeah, we take both Gen Z and older consumers very seriously. We want to support them in their healthcare. We have products in our portfolio that can do that. But first and foremost, it starts with that deep human understanding and respecting people's personal experiences, their personal desires, and connecting our brands and our science with that.
Wow, well, I couldn't have summed up any better myself, Katie. That's such a great summary of our conversation. So I really want to thank you for all of your insights and expertise. You really are sort of woven into the tapestry of people's health and lives. It's been super interesting. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening to The Trust Makers.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you for tuning into The Trust Makers, an Edelman podcast in partnership with Advertising Week, where we speak with leaders and other trust builders across institutions. See you next time.